You are watching NOVANOW.tv, independent community media for Northern Virginia.
Welcome to Education Matters. I'm your host, Harry Jackson. Education Matters. Why are we doing this show? Education is very important to Northern Virginia. We have a multi-billion-dollar budget. Fairfax County spends over $3 billion annually in education. Loudoun County spends over $2 billion. And we send our children to the finest universities and colleges around the world where they compete on a global scale. Education is to Northern Virginia as football is to the SEC. So before we get started here, let me bring in our guest, the founder of NOVANOW.tv, Sam Mataro. Sam?
How's it going, Harry?
It's going well, Sam. How are you?
Great, man. I'm excited. You got your own show, brother. This is fabulous. And I just want to give a shout out to you for being the first to take me up in my offer to start working with other content matter experts to produce high quality content for NOVANOW.tv. So it's an absolute honor to be working with somebody of your caliber and brain power. And I'm thrilled to be able to give you this platform. So welcome to NOVANOW.tv. I'm really looking forward to producing for you in the background. You guys won't be seeing my face very much here. I'm going to be clicking the buttons and hopefully we're going to be going live. You like the idea of going live and taking phone calls live for the audience as well?
Absolutely, but with some of the content, and I'll go through what we're going to be talking about in this upcoming show and future episodes, that might be a little challenging, but I think we're going to have a lot of fun doing that. Thank you, Sam. And for those in the audience, if you have an idea about a show, contact Sam, hit Sam up, and go to NOVANOW.tv and pitch your idea for a show or what you want to talk about and what's an interest to Northern Virginia. About me, why am I here? Why am I speaking about Education Matters? I'm passionate about education. I've been an education activist for the last 10 years. I've been involved with the Fairfax County Association for the Gifted. I've been the president of the Thomas Jefferson High School for Science and Technology. I've also been involved. I'm also a professor. I teach at numerous colleges and universities at the doctoral, master's, and undergraduate level in fields of cybersecurity. I also even expand into peacekeeping and military leadership. Education is something that I'm very, very passionate about. And so for this evening, we're going to start talking about a lot of subject material regarding the governor's race. The governor's race is a dead heat, and education is going to make or break one of these candidates. And tonight, we're going to have a guest with us, Asra Nomani from Parents Defending Education. And some of the topics we're going to be talking about tonight impacting the governor's race is, one, why is the governor's race so close? Why does education matter? What's going across statewide regarding to attacks on meritocracy? What's happening more locally here within our own communities, particularly with Loudoun County, and some of the extreme measures that we've seen from local county school boards in order to silence parents and control the narrative, and how that's even crept its way even into admissions with critical race theory and its implementation of it, or what I like to refer to as woke gone wrong, into reforming for Thomas Jefferson admissions process to Thomas Jefferson School for Science and Technology. Our first guest tonight, Asra Nomani from Parents Defending Education. Asra, good evening.
Hey there, Harry. Great to be with you.
Good to see you again. So before we introduce our audience, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? What is your role, your background, and what is Parents Defending Education?
Sure thing, Harry. And it's so good to be with you on this inaugural venture. As you can see, I have a guest of my own, my cat, Ninja. I'm a mom here in Fairfax County, Virginia. I moved here in the winter of 2008. Moved here to raise my son. Like a lot of people, I came for the schools and raised my boy from elementary school all the way through high school. He just graduated class of 2021 from Thomas Jefferson High School for Science and Technology. And as you know, we have been in the trenches for the past year, accidental activists in our public school system, fighting for merit at Thomas Jefferson High School, and then finding ourselves in the midst of so many other skirmishes. I used to work for the Wall Street Journal for 15 years before I had my son, and that really trained me in the areas of investigation And that's what I try to apply to everything that I do as a mom and now as a local community person in our Fairfax County.
Oh, great and welcome. I saw the classic cats across the keyboards moment just there, but thank you for joining us this evening. So, I just want to have this conversation, and I want to take it from the national scene. Then we're going to talk about local, what's in Loudoun. And then we can actually talk about what's actually going on at Thomas Jefferson's High School for Science and Technology, the nation's #1 high school for the last 2 years in a row. So let's talk about this. Like, you work for Parents Defending Education. There was a letter from the National School Board Association that went to Merrick Garland, who then issued a letter directing the FBI to create a dedicated architecture, a snitch line, so to speak, on parents, calling them domestic terrorists. Can you tell us a little bit of background? And do we have any updates regarding this story?
Oh, absolutely, Harry. As you know, as I was talking about, we have had this battle in the trenches of Fairfax County, but also every school district in America, trying to impact policy of the school board officials and the school districts. We would wake up at 5:55 a.m. to be able to speak to our Fairfax County School Board and to wait for our turn in line. Well, unfortunately, what has happened over the past year is that the school boards don't want to hear from us. And so on September 29th, the National School Board Association, which represents the state school board of America, sent a letter, an SOS, you could call it, to the President Biden. And in it, they compared the protests of parents to domestic terrorism. And indeed, the U.S. Attorney General responded just 2 business days later with a memo in which he, in fact, just as you said, set up a snitch line on parents. And he said that he would invoke the FBI to now investigate us. And that was just disturbing. You might be able to see this little pin that I'm wearing. I'm a mom, not a domestic terrorist.
So what has gotten parents so upriled? Because the Virginia governor's race is very close, and they're saying education is going to make or break this race. What has parents so riled up? Why are parents protesting? Why are parents taking the time to wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning to sign up to speak at the school board meeting? What's driving them?
You know what, Harry, you I know can appreciate this. We are mama bears and papa bears, and nobody gets between us and our cubs. And unfortunately, some of these great institutions, these very entrenched institutions in America, are now trying to interfere with parenting, with the values that we're trying to teach children, with even the advancement of children through education. And so I'll just give you a couple examples. First of all, for example, right here in Fairfax County, Virginia, as you know, the school board removed the merit-based test to TJ that was going to make sure that our kids were at the highest levels of math and science as they entered into the school system. What they have also done is brought in to our curriculum and into our schools this very controversial and divisive ideas that stem out of this ideology called critical race theory. And so, for example, in Wellesley, Massachusetts, we have literal affinity groups in which children are separated by race.
Yeah, sounds like segregation.
Yeah, exactly. And then finally, the most disturbing and troubling issue that we're facing today is, parents just really concerned about the safety of their kids, both from issues related to COVID to sexual assault in the schools.
Well, I think we'll talk about the Loudoun case a little bit later as we go down to the local level. This critical race theory, this is very interesting. This is the type of an ideology that typically discriminates based on one's proximity to whiteness. It also talks about Christianity as well as physical fitness, even right-handedness in some extreme circumstances. And some of the scholars, Ibram Kendi comes to mind, where he mentions that if the outcome is, if it's disproportionate, that it has nothing to do with the individual actions of the person or even their culture. What do you think about, with some of these scholars that are coming in, these diversity, inclusion, and equity consultants that are consulting these school boards? What is your opinion regarding their involvement within our children's education?
Well, great question, Harry. You know, I am an immigrant from India. I moved here when I was 4. I knew no English. I was English as second language student. My parents, we lived in poverty. I was one of the free and reduced lunch kids, and I prospered in our American public school system. I grew up in West Virginia through the public school system there. My teachers were white. I was a student of color, but it was in America that I went from being a kid who literally got off the plane knowing not a word of English. And then at the age of 23, I became a reporter for the Wall Street Journal, one of the best newspapers we have in the country. Like, that's America. That's the American dream. And unfortunately, this philosophy of folks like Ibram Kendi is one in which we are an inconvenient minority. You know, our hard work and our struggles end up, belying the narrative that they try to put forward, that America is just a systemically racist country that puts all of the minorities down. And so what they do is they dismiss people like myself. They dehumanize us. Even sometimes we're called white adjacent. We're called resource hoarders, and that's that dangerous philosophy where they're replacing the old problems that we had, the old hierarchy of human value, with a new hierarchy of human value. And that's why I, as a liberal, protest these very illiberal ideas.
It's very interesting that you mentioned that they're dividing our community based off of race, and it's causing an uprising within our community. And a lot of parents are speaking out, and they're speaking out at these school boards. Have you heard people who are opposed to CRT being accused as racist?
Oh my gosh. I've been called a white supremacist. I've been called a racist, and none of that matters to me, because ultimately, the fire in our belly as mama bears and papa bears is one of just real sense of self. I know who I am. And so many of these parents also know who they are. And that is why we're unapologetic, and uncompromising, really, in our defense of our values and our children. And that is what I think ultimately pushed this National School Board Association to just take this really extreme measure. Plus the fact that one of the prime candidates, in the Democratic Party, one of the leaders of the Democratic Party is facing a very serious threat to his race in this race that Terry McAuliffe has with Glenn Youngkin. And they needed to silence the parents.
I agree. I mean, I think it seems like this narrative just isn't working, where you just can't accuse somebody if they're white, say, hey, I don't like CRT. Does that make me a racist? No, it doesn't. And now it seems like they've elevated this to another level by now calling parents terrorists. I mean, it just seems like a natural progression. It seems absurd, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's just unimaginable, and when that happened, on September 29th, this letter from the School Board Association, I knew that we were being very effective. This organization that I'm with now, Parents Defending Education, is something that I just stumbled into earlier this year. We created it, a group of moms, because we had become accidental activists in our different trenches in this battle over education. And we created this organization, really applying the same approach that so many of us have learned in our different careers. Let's investigate, let's expose, let's hold people accountable. And by late September, we had become such a threat that they needed to just shut us up. And not just us, of course, but like this entire movement of mama bears and papa bears. And that's where I realized, like, wow, I've been covering Washington since I was a kid. I grew up in West Virginia, like I mentioned, and then it was the summer of 1983. I arrived to work, as a free internship in Washington, D.C., got lost at DuPont Circle 1,000 times, not knowing which exit to take as I was going around. I've grown up in this town, and I know how it works. And when they call in the feds, that they are desperate to get control over the politics in whatever universe they're trying to control. And that's what happened.
So do you think it was a little bit of overreach, that they just went completely too far?
I think so. I mean, they needed to get a political solution to a local problem, and they just thought that they could scare us. But it's just not possible with parents. You cannot scare us.
Well, let's talk about this control, this trying to control the narrative, trying to control dissent or criticism of some of these policies that we're seeing in place in Northern Virginia. Has there been a radical shift in parent participation as well as public participation within school board meetings and being able to attend public meetings and to speak and to be listened and heard by our legislatures?
Oh, yeah. So you were asking earlier, like what awakened parents? And of course, it was the tragedy of remote learning and COVID in the spring of 2020 that just really got parents to pay attention to what was happening in schools. All of a sudden, the kids were at home in the classroom, and we could hear the teachers and we could see the lesson plans. And then sometimes, they would just have a disaster and the kids wouldn't even be able to meet with the teachers. Well, that's when I first saw the new social justice campaign that was coming into our school system. And so it was in early June 2020 that I had my first speech ever to our local school board association. And I'm sorry, that was the first time that I had my first speech to our local Fairfax County Public Schools meeting. And I had my 3 minutes. I sat down, in front of the camera like this, and I just let them know how I felt. And I thought that I was actually talking to people who were listening to me, but little did I know what we were all soon to learn, that it was a one-way conversation, that they were not interested in a dialogue. They had their own agenda. And so at that time in June 2020, I met a few parents, folks with names like Suparna and Glenn and Helen, and then Yuyan. And then by June, there were dozens of parents. And then by September, October, we had hundreds of parents. Now there are thousands of parents across the country that are ignited. And it comes out of a sincerity. Harry, they have tried to disparage us, demean us with character assassinations, calling us dark money and right-wing conspiracy creation. But it doesn't matter to us, because what they don't realize is that we're motivated by heart. We're motivated by love of our children. So no smear and no character assassination can ever silence us.
On that note, so let's talk about the national stage and the candidates. We have McAuliffe, that is pro critical race theory, pro having a continuation of some of these policies that are very divisive. Glenn Youngkin, who's for merit-based admissions to governor schools. But let's talk about the extent that this ideology, these radicals are willing to go to lengths they're willing to go to. Let's talk about the Scott Smith case, local in Virginia, in Loudon case. I mean, what's the background? What happened with him? What happened? Let's take us walk us through this. What happened? Tell us the Scott Smith story.
Sure. So, in the midst of all of this activism by parents, a tragedy happened in Loudoun County, Virginia. In a school in Loudoun County Public Schools in late May 2020, a girl went into the girls' restroom. She had a relationship, she said, with a boy who had been grooming her, and she met him in the bathroom. She said explicitly that there were certain sex acts that she was not going to do with him, but he forced himself upon her, and he did perform sodomy then. He was wearing a skirt, but it was not relevant to the issue of his sexuality or gender. It was just excuse, perhaps. We don't know yet to this day, but it was not relevant to the issues of sexuality and gender. And this girl did something very brave and courageous. She told her girlfriends. They went to the assistant principal's office, and there the story gets very sad. There, the father gets called. He isn't really notified about exactly what had happened. Then when he arrives, he's angry. He's very angry as he learns the details. And one of the saddest moments in this whole issue of parental involvement is that the school officials call the police on the dad. He's so angry at what has happened to his dear daughter in the school system. They call the police on the dad. They, pursue charges against the father. And then that poor father continues to advocate for his daughter, goes to a school board meeting in June 2020 and 2021. And there, amidst the chaos of the school board's, failure to govern with any kind of transparency, the school board shuts down the meeting. The poor father has to hear the superintendent say that there had been no instances of sexual attacks in school bathrooms. And he just got antagonized by another person there and was then arrested. And he became Exhibit A of the angry parent. But more specifically, he became footnote number 13 in the National School Board Association letter about this new phenomena of angry parents who are engaging in quote, domestic terrorism.
So if I understand you correct, with his story, it's inconvenient to the narrative when they talk about transgender rights and being able to access a bathroom, because a lot of conservatives have mentioned that, hey, in high school, you may have just that horny teenager that will go to the lengths of wearing a skirt to go see their girlfriend, which I think we've just pointed out. And you have a parent that was baited by a school board official that knew his daughter had been raped. And then he was a footnote for this letter that went to Merrick Garland to call us domestic terrorists? Yes, am I hearing that correctly?
You are, Harry, and you're picking up on exactly the right point. I went back on the letter and I looked. Scott Smith is footnote number 13. And Scott Smith would have remained footnote number 13, except for two things that happened. We, the parents, said, we are not domestic terrorists, and we refused this character assassination. And then something remarkable happened this past week. On Monday, his daughter courageously walked in to hearing room number 1A in Loudoun County. And she stood there, and then she testified. The accuser looking straight at her, and she owned her role in the relationship. She owned the dynamic of the fact that she had had consensual sex with this young man before. But she stood with the message that every girl and woman and human being needs to know, which is that nobody has a right to your body. So there is no right that boy had to her body on that day when she had told him very explicitly that she did not want to engage in this act of sodomy that he forced upon her. So
that's very courageous.
If we just reflect on that for a second, how powerful it is, that she had the wherewithal and the courage to own who she was and to make this young man be responsible for what he had done to her.
Now, if I understand correctly, this perpetrator, I believe does he have another victim at another school? Has this outraged parents?
Yes, and this is the real scandal that is amongst more scandals. The school system removed the boy initially from the school, and then they transferred him to another school. And there he found another victim. He groomed her and he sexually assaulted her. And thus, we see a pattern of this negligence by school officials and what some people call rape culture within our K through 12 public school system. I've written a column for the Fairfax Times that'll be published this week that come back and talk to you more about. But just like the military had to deal with rape culture, just like college campuses have had to deal with rape culture, we have to be very honest about the fact that there is rape culture within K through 12 public schools. And this rape culture exists right here in Northern Virginia, Fairfax County, Virginia, Loudoun County, Virginia. And there are girls and boys, parents, and community members who are saying, we're not going to accept this anymore.
As a father of two daughters, I'm very concerned, and particularly when you have school board members that are pushing for policies such as defund the police and the removal of school resource officers within a school. These are trained professionals that are designed to deter, to de-escalate, as well as to resolve dangerous situations to keep our children safe. And I believe that you have some reporting that that the instances of violent assaults have gone up within our public school system in Fairfax County, Loudoun County, Arlington. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
They have gone up. The numbers have gone up. But guess what? We would hardly know about it because the school systems are not reporting to the statewide database the incidents of assaults that are happening. And so they occur. They even get reported in the local news. But then when you go into the database to see if an assault has happened in your local school or the school that your kid is attending, you don't see it. And so it's a failure again of just basic safety and security for our kids. But meanwhile, these school board officials, these activists, they're just, running down all of these diversity, equity, inclusion plans. And yet they don't understand that the most inclusive thing that you could do for a child is keep the school safe for every single child that attends the school. And so this is a real failure. But what we have now is parents, students, speaking up and saying, they're not going to accept this anymore. But unfortunately, the school board officials continue to ignore them. Just like poor Mr. Smith was ignored, we have a mom here in Fairfax County, Virginia, Stacy Langton, who went to the school board and presented examples of porn and pedophilia in our school system.
What?
Well, guess what, Harry? She's been trying to get an appointment with Stella Pekarsky, the chair of the school board. Stella has conveniently arranged for a meeting November 3rd, the day after the election.
The day after. Seems like she's a reasonable person would assume she may be avoiding accountability or answering to the public. This is amazing. It's just very disturbing that you would see that the school board, it's almost, it seems like it's woke gone wrong. I think that's probably the best way to phrase it, is woke gone wrong. You're not keeping you're not keeping our children safe. They're in dangerous situations. You're pushing agendas without properly planning it. I mean, Northern Virginia is a very liberal area. I mean, most of us are pro-gay rights and we're pro-LGBTQ. And, and most can agree that people, and most can agree that we agree that, as to your point with Stacey Langdon, that there should be some material. And just for those of you that are watching, this show is very purple. I mean, we're going to be throwing jabs and straight lines to both the right and the left, however we see it and how we're going to call it. We're going to call out this one. You mentioned before, like, the policy, transgender policy of being able to go into the bathroom of the gender that you identify with, and it kind of left it very subjective when you looked in that student Bill of Rights that was signed by Fairfax County, where it kind of left it up to the judgment of the school, like, hey, is this boy really transgender? Is he really identifying as a female, or is he just trying to get some? And I think this is a case where a person gets some who's a predator and assaulted another student. So let's talk about some other issues that we've seen. You talked about Stacy Langton, and I'm familiar with this case as well. So let's tell us about Stacy, about another case of woke going wrong, and what the intent was and what happened in reality, and did they own up to it or did they double down?
Yeah, I mean, and to your point, Harry, exactly. Like, I am an advocate for gay rights and LGBTQ rights, believe in same-sex marriage and the protection and safety of all students, of course. The school board officials are just refusing to have a reasonable conversation with parents about safety and security concerns. Like, we have to be able to really meet people where they're at in terms of appreciating that folks are coming from a place of good intention, and they are really not trying to hate on anyone. This is really an issue that is difficult. It's painful. It's very personal. It's very intimate, because restrooms, for example, are a place of real intimacy. And so this is something that they really need to navigate with more cultural responsiveness, as they like to say. But, on Stacy's case, it's just another example of a mother who just never spoke to the school board before and stepped forward with great courage, speaking words that she didn't want to ever utter from her mouth, but read the text of these indecent narratives that were presented in one of the books, and then showing visually the graphics of another book. And I was there. I just happened to be there that night. I was on the waiting list to speak, and they didn't call my name until later. But I put on my phone and videotaped her, because I knew that this was a school board that was not going to let Stacy's voice be expressed. And sure enough, before her 2 minutes had even run out, they had interrupted her. They then called a 5-minute recess. And this sincere mom was silenced. And so it's that kind of courage that every one of us needs to express and tap, because these folks are not really to be trusted right now. They are working in a very, very shady universe of double dipping, political favors, revolving doors, just, all this stuff that you think about when you imagine political corruption. That's what we're seeing. Secret deals, lack of transparency, even lies and deception. And so, I wish the best for our schools. I was raised in our school, but we've got to have eyes on them right now.
And these actors, and with Stacey Langton, I mentioned the doubling down. Were there school board meetings where there were people saying, no, this material is not in these books? And how was that handled? What kind of material was in the books specifically? And then what did they deny saying was in those books? I know it's a little bit of a leading question there.
So one of the books is called Genderqueer. And in that book, you have explicit images of fellatio and sex. It happens to be gay sex, or in one instance with the girl, it's a girl pretending to be a boy or imagining to be a boy. I mean, there's just different levels of narrative there, but that's irrelevant. Again, it's what's really important is just the explicitness of the images. And then also, I think one of the most disturbing images is this image of one of the characters imagining a bearded man having sex with a young prepubescent boy, and it normalizes pedophilia, and that's not okay. But unfortunately, what we have now are people who I think of, they're doing this thing that I've called woke washing. They are basically trying to, clean these books up by saying things like, oh, well, I mean, would you have a problem with this if they were heterosexual books? And yes, most parents would have a problem with it if they were heterosexual books.
I would have to agree with you. The question, in these libraries, how accessible, at what age level would some of these kids have access to this material? 13-year-old, 12-year-old, anything younger?
Yeah, they were available at Robinson Secondary School, which is a middle school and high school. And it has, its age group goes to 7th grade. And so 7th grade is usually 12-year-olds, but they can be as young as 11-year-olds, right? If they're advanced. And so, yeah, so that's really inappropriate. And what's so unbelievable is that the school board did decide they're going to pull these two books for a review, and they're going to have parents in the group, and then they're going to have a student in the group, the review group. They're going to make sure that the student is 18 years old so that the student is now an adult and can have this, conversation about explicit sex with probably somebody who's in their 40s and 50s. I mean, it's just so inappropriate. It just boggles the mind that our school officials think that this is appropriate.
And they're doing this to make a determination if an 11-year-old should have access to this material. And this is happening right here in Northern Virginia. Amazing.
Yeah.
It is incredible.
Yeah. And that's why it's so outrageous when we had this past week, former President Barack Obama saying that there's fake outrage by parents on these various issues. I had mentioned earlier that I moved to Virginia in 2008. And the only reason I moved to Virginia as a Muslim single mom of color was because the state had voted for Barack Obama. I twice voted for Barack Obama. And I thought, the state is finally liberal enough for me. That's how progressive I am. And so the idea that former President Barack Obama would then come to the state and declare all of these issues fake outrage is just so insensitive, to even his own identity as a father, because as well as I do that if anything like what happened in Loudoun County happened in the school that his daughter attended, he would be the first man there at the school principal's office saying, we got a problem.
Well, I believe his daughter went to private school, so he believed in school choice for himself in that regard. But as you said, I voted twice for Barack. I voted for Hillary as well. So we're just seeing a lot of just woke going wrong. And does it seem like in which, unfortunately, this is the Democratic platform going into the governor's race. Sorry, getting a little tongue twisted there. So, wow, that's just a lot going on, and they're just doing a lot of things wrong. And let's talk about silencing. Has Stacey Langton had the activist, a brave woman that came forward and brought this to light to our community? Is she facing any backlash?
Oh my gosh. I just feel so bad for Stacey because she's a mom who just stood up with sincerity and heart and good intention. And, I joined her at a march that we did, a rally in front of the Justice Department. We took our signs and literally wore this button, I'm a mom, not a domestic terrorist, at the Justice Department on Constitution Avenue last Sunday, 2 Sundays ago, sorry. And Stacey was there, and the parents were chanting, "We the parents." And the next day, Stacey ended up getting disturbing threats to her text to her phone. Police are investigating it, and I hope that they will be able to figure out who is behind this effort to just, silence this innocent mom. And yet, like so many people, then she's undeterred. She is a person who is clear in her convictions, and I hope that everybody else can be inspired by all of this work. Mr. Smith, Stacey Langton, you, Harry, just so many parents. Northern Virginia is really the ground zero in America for the challenge to these institutions that want to control our children and really dumb down education. We have parents who are journalists and lawyers and plumbers and government contractors, people who have really been entrepreneurs and enterprising people in their own professions. They thought they would have a quiet life, letting their kids go to school in some of the best schools in the country, but they're not going to be silent. And so I hope people will join, in whatever issue matters to you. I hope you will join others in whichever way you feel comfortable, whether it's, on the front lines or behind the scenes. I just hope that every parent and every community member and taxpayer recognizes that this is our neighborhood. This is in our backyard. You don't have to go very far to see this war on children and parents. It is happening right here, right now. And we need everybody engaged.
And it takes, I agree, it takes the moral courage of parents to actually stand up to this machine. And even before all of this madness goes forward, let's talk about the insanity let's talk about the war on merit. Let's talk about, let's talk about how did all of this in Northern Virginia get started? And what really woke the watershed moment that woke up everybody, and they said, "Whoa,
Yeah.
let's talk about TJ admissions."
Yeah, people want to just dismiss us now because we're so powerful. They want to try to demonize us and make a caricature of who we are. But we know very deeply that this all began on my birthday, June 7th, 2020, when the principal of Thomas Jefferson High School for Science and Technology sent a letter for the parents and students of the school. My son was a junior then. And she told us that we needed to check our privileges. So this was a message that was going to a mostly Asian, mostly immigrant, mostly minority student body and student family
from a white woman.
And she was a white woman. Yeah. Yeah. And you can just imagine, Harry, I mean, you've come from very long, complicated history. I'm the first generation born out of colonialism in India. So my parents literally lived through white supremacy and survived it. So you can just imagine, for me to hear a lecture from this white principal, I wouldn't normally care about race, except all of a sudden now, all we were about was race to her. And it was in that memo that she told us that the racial demographics of Thomas Jefferson High School for Science and Technology needed to match the racial demographics.
Well, let me stop you there. The racial demographic at Thomas Jefferson has to match the racial demographic of the community. Isn't that what the local high schools are for? And let's talk about what is a governor's school? Let's just review that. Let's educate our viewers. What is a governor's school?
So governor's school was created in order to have a place for advanced learners. And, a lot of times folks can be confused about what that might be. But in Fairfax County, we call it the Advanced Academic Program. In other communities, they call it Gifted and Talented Program. It's a tough concept, but what we understand now in education is that, in fact, there are some students who are advanced learners. Some of them may be in the arts, some of them may be in science and math. And so Thomas Jefferson High School was created to be a place for advanced learners in science, technology, engineering, and math, STEM, as we call it.
It was created to draw an industry and even immigrant communities back when it was created back in 85, wasn't it?
It was. And so what happened is that, as some people may or may not know, we had this thing called the Y2k bug, and that people were afraid of in 2000. And so I sometimes call the kids of the classes of TJ right now the Y2k kids, because a lot of engineers and software programmers and others arrived from India and China and other places to help save America from the Y2k bug on New Year's Eve 2000. Well, thankfully, all of our country didn't disintegrate that night, but they settled, really built up Loudoun County and Fairfax County. Asians are now 20% of the population of these two counties. They had kids. And so, for example, my son was born in 2002. So a lot of the kids that are in the classes right now at TJ, that's why I call them the Y2K kids. Some of them were born under those demographics. Others came for other reasons. But nonetheless, today TJ has 70% Asian population of students, and 10% is Black, Hispanic, and multiracial, and then 20% is white. Well, we weren't on the right side of brown as Asians. And so the school board and the school principal and Bonitatabus took it upon themselves with the Secretary of State, Atif Karni, to change admissions to TJ so that they could pull off this thing that's called racial balancing. And what we argue is that it's illegal.
Now, TJ has had an issue with on some underrepresented minorities. And for the audience, there are some underlying factors. And in a later segment, I'll actually go into a deep dive as to why historically there's been a lack of representation from both the Black and Hispanic communities. But let's talk about how Thomas Jefferson relates to CRT, where, adhering to some of the tenets from Ibram Kendi, where he had mentioned that to remedy past discrimination, you have to have present discrimination, and to remedy present discrimination, you have to have future discrimination. So you're having a future cycle of this continuous cycle of discrimination. And let's talk about the discrimination against the Asian community when it comes to Thomas Jefferson. Now, we have a current admissions process that is a proprietary process. You do not know how your son or daughter is being graded, but they're going to come up with a secret sauce and magic formula, and voila, they're going to get the racial demographic they're looking for. Now, but let's talk about this. Wasn't this flawed? How did we get to that one? And what did they initially propose as to get to their final solution?
So in this phenomena that, has now been dubbed domestic terrorism, we had these ordinary parents. I was introducing you to some of them, Yuyan, Suparna, Glenn, Helen, just regular folks who were like, okay, this is messed up. Like, what is going on here? And so we came together and we created an organization called Coalition for TJ. And our community went and did rallies and protests in front of the school. And for a lot of people, that may seem ordinary, but you have to understand that many of our community, for example, from the Chinese community, are survivors of the Cultural Revolution. They have experienced regimes in which you die if you speak up to the person in power. And then folks from other countries have survived communism in Eastern Europe. And so we created this organic grassroots effort that was simply trying to impact public policy. And the first wonderful idea that the school board dreamt up along with Superintendent Scott Brabrand was the idea of a lottery. A lottery. Can you imagine, to pick who our brightest kids were in STEM? Well, and of course, the placard was, we'd like to pick our school board members by lottery.
Well, let's talk about this lottery. I mean, was it a countywide lottery, or was it a lottery that really split up the county, split up Fairfax? Because Thomas Jefferson has students that come from Loudoun County, Arlington County, Prince William, and Fairfax. But how did they really design this lottery? Who did it really target? And who are the chief beneficiaries of this lottery that they initially proposed?
Yeah, the one great thing about having these super smart kids is that they have super smart parents. And so among our parents are data scientists, and they crunch the numbers. And what we in fact discovered was that the lottery system and then a subsequent hybrid system that they emerged with was basically meant to be a purge on Asians and reducing dramatically the number of Asians in the school. It would increase the number of white students. And, we do definitely want to increase the number of Black and Hispanic students, but it was not done through a process of merit or a process of actually preparing the students academically. It was done by random chance and geographical quotas that ended up very conveniently, rigging the numbers as the school board members wanted to do.
Which demographic, which racial group would have had the greatest proportion of seats to the school under the merit lottery or even the hybrid lottery system? Would it have been majority Asian? Plurality?
Well, one of the jokes was that the school board was had a scheme to make TJ white again, because one of the greatest beneficiaries was going to be white students. And of course, we should not have any discrimination against anyone, right? Especially when you're working in a merit-based process, it should be based on merit. But unfortunately, this new system, it's like a popularity contest now. You can just put your finger on the scale with any kid, is it's just it's gerrymandering of demographics. I mean, it's really unfortunate, and I believe we will ultimately see it as an illegal process and an illegal system. And the reason why everyone should care is because this is our education system, and what has happened at TJ is now happening in Boston, New York City, Philadelphia, San Francisco. It is a war on merit. And this ideologue that you just mentioned, Ibram Kendi, just want to let everyone know, he is an export of Virginia. He grew up in Prince William County. He brags that he was, a C student who could barely get respectable scores on the college entrance exams. And now he is today single-handedly, through his really flawed approach to equity, really destroying American education.
So we're having a C student. So we're having a C student, I don't think he hasn't, I don't know, I'm not aware of any advanced degrees that he has. I mean, like I said, I've got a doctorate, 3 master's degrees, and 2 graduate certificates, and he's running education. I mean, I'm a professor. I teach at a number of colleges and universities, and he's involved in education. And it's interesting. It's kind of like the inconvenient minority. I mean, they called you adjacent white, and they attack something that's working well, the governor's school. I mean, the school is number 1 in the nation, 2 years consecutive. And now they're just looking to destroy it and just run it right into the ground. And it seemed like they just used, the Black and Hispanic community as a foil to really help out the white community in our area. And again, it's dividing it by race. That is just very disturbing. We talk about just how they type of suppress information and activism. Did the parents at TJ, do they stand up for that? Do they stand against that?
Well, so Ibram X. Kendi, as his assumed name is now, he does like to be. He is called Dr. Kendi. He did get an advanced degree, but okay. But he got a PhD at Temple. Ultimately, what does it matter? Ultimately, his ideas are bad ideas. They're dangerous ideas. They're divisive ideas, and he's raking in money. He's part of an industry of consultants. Fairfax County, Virginia paid him $20,000 to speak to teachers and principals for 1 hour virtually. So, for the time that our viewers have been watching us, we should have raked in thousands of dollars, Harry. But we don't.
We should
doing
have
this as a service.
And it's amazing. So, look, I guess a question. So the previous admissions test process into Thomas Jefferson, wasn't that a race-blind, gender-blind process? Okay, so by logic, that would... Yeah, I guess where I'm leading to that is that it seems that that process would have identified deficiencies in the pipeline, the academic pipeline leading up to TJ. And now we have a person who's profiting by having some proprietary process that covers that up. I think in the Black community, we refer to a person who does that, who benefits or profits off of the suffering of those less fortunate in that matter and perpetuating a problem. They're referred to as a poverty pimp, where they're just raking in the money and the problem never gets solved, but they're getting paid. Wow, let's talk about how did the parents of TJ take this? How did they respond?
Yeah, to your question about that, I mean, we have an incredible engaged community of parents, both at TJ and inside the community, who are fighting for merit. I mean, they are folks who are, understand that the American dream that they came to pursue is one that they want to have passed on to their children and their children after that. And so that's phenomenal. Unfortunately, we also have a network of parents who are activist parents going along with the very, regressive ideas of racial balancing and critical race theory. And they are very strong activists within the community, currently entrenched with the school board. But I want to just say as a final thought to everyone that, you must stand up for all of the same, ideas that you were able to believe over all these years of your life. You cannot be shamed now into believing that everything that you were taught by your parents or, your teachers was regressive and racist and a symbol of white supremacist America. We are who we are, and we need to really hold on to the values that we care about and really fight for them, because we're going to face these folks who are really trying to hijack our schools and our communities, and they will go to any means necessary to try to undermine you and sabotage you and assassinate your character. But just be solid and clear in who you are, because what you are is what we will leave our children. And we have to fight strongly for our values. So thank you so much, Harry, for having me join you today.
Asra, thank you. And now we're focused on Loudoun County. We have a special guest here on the show today, Mr. Michael Rivera, who bravely announced at the last Loudoun County School Board meeting his candidacy running for school board.
Here we are again at Groundhog Day. More scandals and more frustrated parents. When you wake up to a Washington Post article entitled, "Parents Claim They Have the Right to Shape Their Kids' School Curriculum, They Don't." That's in quotes. That is an alarm that cannot be ignored. Our school board and government believe that they own our children, but that statement cannot be further from truth or reality. I'm done being frustrated, shocked, disrespected, and unheard. Therefore, I am choosing to take responsibility for my family to preserve our rights and those of all parents that utilize the public school system. My name is Michael Rivera, and I am submitting my qualifications to fill Beth Bart's empty board seat in the Leesburg district to restore a public school system focused on academics, collaboration with parents, and the safety of our children.
Mr. Rivera, welcome.
How you doing? Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Oh, great. Well, Michael, thank you for joining us on Education Matters. So you've announced that you're running for school board. Why are you running for school board?
Well, as I indicated in a prior interview with Fox, I think it's important that people get involved and get out of their comfort zone and actually make a difference. And to be honest, I would have never thought that I'd be in this position running for school board. I was quite happy being a normal person, just living at home, enjoying my family. But there came a point at which I'm watching everything happen, and things are getting more extreme. They're not getting any better. The screams from the parents and the citizens in Loudoun are getting louder. And quite honestly, I just felt after speaking with my wife, it was time to just step in and be part of the solution as opposed to just complain about it and sit behind a keyboard.
Wow, your story sounds very similar. I've coming across so many parents are becoming accidental activists over the last year from what we've been seeing. And I think you may agree with me. A lot of what we've been seeing within our schools is what I like to refer to as woke going wrong. So let's talk about like some of the solutions. I know in this show we're going to talk about a lot of the problems. I realize that within your district, Beth Bartz also recently resigned in disgrace after being involved in that cover-up within the Scott Smith case, and it was unfortunate that they didn't do enough to protect our children within Loudoun County schools. So let's just be positive. You seem like be like a beacon of hope to us and for the citizens in Loudoun County. What are some of the solutions that you're going to be bringing?
Well, I think first and foremost, we need to get back to pure education. So I'm an engineer by education, bachelor's and master's degree. And my graduate degree and my undergrad were all focused on math and science and facts and data. And I think we need to get back to that. There are a lot of distractions, and we've sort of derailed the school board and the board of education, and the legislature has sort of gotten derailed into politics and other ideologies. And first and foremost, the kids are the ones that are suffering the most here. And we need to just get back to education, get politics out of the school system, and also let parents have a say in their children's education, because there's some things that I will compromise on, but and I'll say it over and over again, I will not compromise on my role in bringing up my children and having a part in their educational system. Parents are the ones that teach kids morality. They teach them integrity. They teach them about truth. At no point in time do I think any parent, not just my wife and I, any parent should hand over that responsibility to the state. So along those two things, get back to education, get parents involved again, and then just restore school safety.
So let me just do a recap, and I can't believe I'm gonna have to ask these questions. So you're for removing political activism in schools. That's would that be a correct statement? You don't want to see school board members used as a platform for political activism.
That's absolutely true. Now, let me couch that, because for someone to say that the school board is supposed to be apolitical would be a move of putting your head in the sand. People are fallible. Human beings are fallible. They all have their political affiliations. They all have their implicit biases. They all have things that affect the way they act and the way they make decisions. That being said, I think we need to remove overt political actions and overt political agendas from the school board, because at the end of the day, what matters is the education of the children. And I said this once before, the hardest thing that a politician has to do ever in their career is to rule or make a decision based on the population that he is representing that goes against what he or she may believe. So if you are a Republican, you're making a decision for the good of the Democratic majority in your district, and vice versa. And that's one of the most difficult decisions that a politician needs to make. But it seems like we've gotten away from that, and now it's politicians are going to kind of make whatever decision benefits them and their party, and not the good of the constituency.
Which in this case would be the children. Making decisions is best for the children. And you mentioned before that one of your priorities is safety for the children. So if you were sort of that in that situation, in Scott Smith's case, what would you have done differently, being in the sitting on that school board?
Well, I had thought about that, and you can only control kids so much. And the fact that someone entered into the female's bathroom, a boy entered in there, I don't know all the details of the case, and I'm not going to try and be a Monday morning quarterback. However, factually, the school board created a problem that didn't exist, and now they're repairing that problem with money. They passed a policy that was sympathetic to the trans community. And as a result of that policy, biological males were allowed to go in the bathroom with biological females. Now, let me just say, in America, you could be anything or anyone you want to be, and that's great. And that's your right as an American. But this problem that was created now allowed biological males to decide what gender they wanted to be that day, or how they wanted to act. And the school board is using money, construction money, to retrofit the bathrooms to make them safer. Now, you have to ask yourself, what do you mean retrofit the bathrooms to make them safer? Well, maybe a female may need to lock herself in a stall because of something going on in the bathroom. So we're spending money to fix a problem that didn't need to be created. And all along, all the parents wanted to do was discuss the policy. So let's get back to square one. There was an outrage because there was no discussion. And the school board said, well, we put it out on the internet and there was a comment period and you could have commented, but let's be realistic about that. Some lower income families, some non-English speaking families don't have access to Wi-Fi, don't have access to the internet. Quite honestly, may not even know what's going on, don't know who their school board member is. And what we wanted to do was have town hall meetings or parent panels or something like that. And it was never really addressed. And look at where we are today. There's an outrage as a backlash to the lack of communication. And I think that's why one of my priorities is to let's get parents back involved in the discussion so that we don't do this again.
Well, you mentioned before parental involvement. seems like this is a common sense approach since the parents are involved in the child's lives every day. So I mentioned a little bit earlier of a segment, we've seen in Loudoun County where they've reduced the amount of public participation available at school board meetings, even speaking time down to, I believe, 1 minute. Is that even sufficient amount of time? Is that even a sufficient amount of time for a parent to make their point across of how to address the board? Are there any, what exists now, and you mentioned panels and town halls. What would you change are you recommending changes to the school board format for public engagement?
Well, when I got involved, it was May of this year, and you could go to a school board meeting. You sat in the audience. There were just rows of chairs. And each speaker would approach the podium and be able to address the board, and the members in the audience, the parents and citizens in the audience, would express approval or disapproval. As time went on, the temperature of the crowd got a little bit heated in that the school board really wasn't listening to the parents. Even though they had a podium, even though their words were being said, no one was really listening. Fast forward, then parents were not allowed in the room. So you walked into a room and you went to a podium and you spoke just to the board, and no one was there to support you. Keep going forward, the podium moved further away from the dais, and now you're in the back of the room with a huge space in between you and the board members. You can't actually even see the expressions on their faces. And now you're talking there, and then the press is allowed to be in. Senior staff from the school board is on another side, but it's very intimidating. So we've had a lot of parents that are intimidated about speaking because of this setup. And we need to get the parents, not to mention security. So security has increased 10 or 12-fold, whereby now we're being wanded into the building. Armed security guards are roaming the property, circling the people rallying outside, and you feel like you're going through a TSA line to get into the building. And parents, quite honestly, are upset and insulted at being treated this way. We need to get the parents back in the room, even have a conversation about meeting decorum so that we can all agree how to move forward. But the way it is now, we're not making progress.
That does seem absolutely absurd, that what they're doing to parents to intimidate them. We even seen that with the Merrick Garland memo to the FBI requesting a snitch line to the FBI, and then Loudoun County comes to the forefront where they're treating it as if you're going into a supermax prison, wanding and armed guards, all the posturing and moving it away from the school board. I mean, it does seem that the school board does not view itself that it's accountable to the people. And so I say thank you for stepping up and having the courage to run for school board, to do what's best for our children, and to make sure that parents do have a say in their child's education and that they are involved.
I final thoughts, sir. I appreciate it. I think that I have a lot of support from family and friends and within the community, a lot of great parents that I've met since I got involved in the spring. And my pledge to everyone is to remain honest and true to the people that I'm going to represent. It's not about me. I don't have an ego and I need to hold this political office. I really just need to be a voice for all of us over here that are not being heard. And that's how I want to move forward. I want to make sure that all of the parents are represented. And again, making that difficult decision. If I have to step up to the plate and tell people, well, the majority of Loudoun County parents feel that they want to do X, and the group that supports me says, no, we don't want that. I have to really abide by what the majority of the people of the county want. And if I have to make that difficult decision, I will.
Well, thank you. So you'll be nonpartisan, data-driven, and advocacy for parental involvement. And I think that's absolutely what we need to have in our schools and education to educate our kids, not to indoctrinate them. Any final thoughts, sir?
I told my wife I'm jumping on the roller coaster. We're going to see where the ride takes us. And in terms of the process, right now it will be a selection. A year from now will be a special election. A year from that will be the regular election. So if I'm not selected this time, I'll run for the special election. If I'm not selected in the special election, I'll sit back, reevaluate, and see if I need to run in the general election. But I feel strongly in my convictions that I need to do something, and I can't sit back and just be a victim.
Well, thank you, sir. I'm glad that you're one of those parents that have, like myself, we became accidental activists a year ago. I would have never thought being in this position. I'm sure you probably feel the same way. But after seeing what's been going on within our school boards, within Loudoun County, Fairfax, Prince William, Arlington, and Stafford counties, the parents need to stand up and get involved. We are the ones that raise our children, not the schools.
Absolutely. Harry, just want to say I appreciate the opportunity to speak, and I think your questions were thoughtful, and I look forward to more opportunities to engage with the public and move forward on this adventure.
Mr. Rivera, thank you for coming on and sharing with us your message, and thank you again for standing up and getting involved and running for school board. Mr. Michael Rivera, running for Loudoun County Public School Board. As we've seen, a lot of parents are getting involved. Mr. Rivera is one of them. He makes his decisions based on data, accurate data, and he's an engineer, so we know where his critical thinking processes are. He's for removing political activism within our schools, and his focus is on the children, and he's, more importantly, is supportive of parental involvement in our schools, where the parents raise their children, not the schools. Thanks for watching. You're watching Education Matters with Dr. Harry Jackson, your host. Stay tuned for upcoming issues. Next, we're going to be talking about the Thomas Jefferson High School for Science and Technology and the drama that's been ongoing within their Parent-Teacher-Student Association, as well as updates with the governor's race and the impact on the educational policy and how that's going to influence voters. Stay tuned, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.